Top story this week, anarchy in the USA. And I speak to you from a country, Andy, currently without a government. Andy, here America has become part Belgium, part Somalia in the last few days. The entire government has shut down pointlessly, childishly, stupidly and entirely avoidably, leaving the whole country slamming its head into walls in frustration while being justifiably angry with themselves for expecting anything better. There is absolutely no need for this to be happening here right now, Andy, but inexplicably Congress has decided to do it anyway. And all of this is happening in protest over Obamacare, the healthcare system that was passed by the House, examined by the Supreme Court, and which is now the law of the land. The House has tried to overturn it with 42 separate votes, all of which failed, and now they've shut down the government for refusing to pass a budget which includes funding for it. It is, at best, petulant, and at worst, an act of breathtaking but depressingly precedented f***wittery. So now, all non-essential government workers have been furloughed, which means programmes have been shut down left, right and centre, and on the most immediately visual level, some of America's most popular landmarks have shut down. Yellowstone Park, closed. Yosemite National Park, concreted over. Jellystone doesn't exist. You're thinking of where Yogi Bear lived. Statue of Liberty has a hood over her head. Grand Canyon, completely filled in. They have filled the whole thing in with sawdust, Andy, just in case anyone tried to take an illegal peek at it.
Is it true that if this goes on for another week, the Statue of Liberty will have to put on a full niqab?
Yes, that is absolutely. I mean, it could be true, so that basically makes it a fact, Andy. This is, of course, just the tip of an extremely irritating iceberg. Thousands of workers are going without pay. People living paycheck to paycheck are already struggling. Meals on Wheels has cut back. Head Start has frozen. Scientific research has been held up. And the lack of empathy from some Conservative pundits has been mind-blowing. Many have been on TV this week claiming that the effects of the shutdown are not that bad, essentially arguing, well, how can it be painful if I personally don't feel anything? And no one I'm personally acquainted with also feels anything. Look, if I couldn't do my job as a bloviating talking head for a while, I'd simply fall back on the royalties from my books or do a few more after-dinner speeches. Why can't everyone else do that? Because they're afraid of hard work, that's why. And please don't bother me with sob stories. Oh, boo-hoo, museums and national parks are closed. Well, I don't go to those anyway, which proves that we don't need them. Oh, boo-hoo, so a few zoo workers get furloughed. I am not personally a panda, so why should I care? And all of that, Andy, would be true if all government did was spend your money, give your daughter free abortions and scoop up panda shit. And I'm not saying that it doesn't do all three of those things, Andy, extremely well. They do them well. But government does other stuff too, like, say, the Centre for Disease Control here, whose staff have been cut by 2/3 now the government is shut down, meaning they'll be completely unable to monitor the beginning of flu season, or as it's otherwise known, now. Now, immediately now. And if even the imminent threat of disease doesn't scare Conservatives into seeing the innate value of government, Andy, what about something that truly does terrify them, such as Mexicans? Because the government, grinding to a halt, has also shut down E-Verify, the government system allowing the companies to check the legal status of employees. And when you add that to the Centre for Disease Control closing down, it's not just Mexicans streaming over the border now, Andy, it's Mexicans with the flu, sneezing all over your plants. And think about what that means. You pick a flower, you give it to your wife, boom, your whole family is dead.
I've heard also that the entire 5,500 mile long border with Canada is now patrolled by one man.
Yes.
When that has to... I mean, America is basically on the brink of collapse.
Well, he's got a pair of binoculars, Andy. He'll be fine.
So the United States of America is shit. Sorry, shut. What is the past tense of shut? Shit. Shut it. F***ed. Shut it. Shut. And the world's self-styled #1 nation has essentially voluntarily applied for official global laughingstock status with an internal budget spat that has basically made the ancient Greeks sit up naked in their graves and admit, well, democracy was a nice idea, but frankly, in practice, it is total shit. And I guess it just goes to show, John, the ancient saying that you can't spell Tea Party Republican without f***ing lunatic.
It's a pretty bold move from Congress to do something that pisses almost everyone off on this kind of scale for no kind of rational reason. But again, that's hardly surprising. There is no incentive for them to be anything other than awful. Just look at the numbers. Congress currently has a 10% approval rating. Apparently, that is lower than the approval rating for colonoscopies, which actually makes sense, because the more you think about it, both Congress and colonoscopies deal with arseholes, but the American public can at least acknowledge that colonoscopies serve a practical function. Also, colonoscopies exist to make arseholes better. Congress just seems to make them worse. And yet, Andy, even with this mere 10% approval rating, members of Congress also have a 90% re-election rate. How is that f***ing possible, Andy? They're somehow batting 900 while striking out every time they're at bat. That doesn't obey the basic laws of mathematics.
Harry Reid said, we need to act like adults. Now, I mean, it does, as you say, American democracy is clearly in a bit of a state, but it's not good when people have to say that. And also, he has to specify which adults it needs to behave like. Do not, for example, model yourself on adults such as A, me, B, Hulk Hogan, which is basically who they seem to have been acting like, or C, Hitler, who was in many ways much naughtier as an adult than he was as a child. Maybe act like teenagers instead. Just ignore the fact that you don't really like each other and just get it on anyway.
President Obama, just before the shutdown, said that he would not set a precedent where an extremist wing of a party holds a government to ransom. But, here's the thing. That is happening right now, Andy. The only thing he does get to decide is whether to pay the ransom or not. Because the letter from the so-called Suicide Caucus here of 80 Republicans from safe seats that's put us on the path to this mess could not have looked any more like a ransom note if each letter was cut out the pages of magazines. Now, you might think, well, how can 80 congressmen possibly have the power to do something as incredible as this? And it's because they face no consequences, Andy, absolutely none. The roots of this go so deep, and even though this is absolutely a Republican tantrum that's being thrown here, both sides are responsible for them being able to throw it. Those 80 districts were all won by Republicans with an average margin of victory of 34%. That is unhealthily high, and a shocking amount of America's congressional districts have now become completely uncompetitive, all due to gerrymandering, strategically redrawing electoral maps every 10 years for political gain. Gerrymandering, of course, is an Old English word meaning grouping all of the black people together. Now, this is why congressional maps in America no longer resemble shapes found in nature, and instead look like they've been drawn by a baby in the middle of being burped. They're drawn. They're drawn by whichever party controls the State House every decade when a new census is available. And historically, Democrats have in fact been more guilty of this than Republicans. This shores up safe seats, but also means that any challenges are likely to come from the extreme wing of any party, meaning the Republicans may not have to run against a Democrat at all, as the Democrats may not even bother running a candidate. But they do have to run against a Tea Party maniac, pulling them even further to the right. It just makes you realise that America's democracy is even more deeply f***ed than you previously thought, in more ways than you were even aware of. It's awful, Andy. What's happening here is terrible.
It seems to have got worse since you weren't there, John.
I can't disagree with that, to be honest. And the most horrifying part of all of this is that it's about to get so much worse with the debt ceiling negotiations here in a couple of weeks. Because believe me, this budget shutdown is only fiscal foreplay compared to the orgy of incompetence, the sheer brinksmanship bangfest that is going to take place in America in a fortnight.
So I guess the question is, John, will common sense prevail? And the answer is obviously no. It's constitutionally not really supposed to. And currently the American legislature is working about as harmoniously as a bunch of T-Rexes and a bunch of Stegosauruses arguing over who gets first bite of the nice juicy asteroid that appears to be heading their way for dinner. And it all basically comes down to the eternal dick jousting contest that is healthcare in America. And there are some extremely priapic political prongs being sharpened as we speak. And the Republicans are trying to force various compromises to stall Obamacare, including the latest one I read about this morning, John, the right for anyone earning over $300,000 a year to shoot a poor person once a year to compensate for more of them having access to basic life-saving treatments. So maybe that is the the one ray of hope. Maybe that will be the compromise that works. So, if this is not solved, how is it all going to pan out? Well, we've run this through the Bugle's Predictor X 3000 future simulator, and, well, it doesn't look good for the celebrity nation of 300+ million and one-time World Cup football semi-finalist. Within a week, UN peacekeepers will have been deployed to the capital. There will be airdrops of emergency food and some basic common sense. As you say, national parks are being closed, the Grand Canyon, first filled with sawdust, and then there'll be a giant infestation of guinea pigs that will have to be dealt with. The Pentagon is going to run out of money by next Wednesday, leaving the US vulnerable to a pincer attack by the new Canado-Mexican alliance. The government hurriedly supplying extra pitchforks to farmers to defend their lands. The disbanded US military will be sold piece by piece to the highest bidder, so expect some high-profile transfers of 4-star generals to the Chinese army or the Congolese rebels. Apart from the Air Force, which is going to be made into a Major League Baseball franchise, the Washington Wingwagglers. Mount Rushmore, and this really gets to the heart of it, John. Mount Rushmore under threat, with suggestions that Abraham Lincoln's eyebrows are going to be raised.
Oh, no.
George Washington given a disapproving scowl. T.J. Jefferson's mouth altered to make him look like he's about to say the second F in for fuck's sake. And Teddy Roosevelt will be replaced with Lindsay Lohan seductively eating a banana. It is that serious, John. That's it. And also, Washington National Zoo will become the de facto seat of government, with a barely discernible difference, but a significant cost saving.